Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. I'm going to start off today's episode by teasing you all a little bit. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video, where I will introduce a new segment exclusive to Den of the Drake videos. It's an idea that I've had in order to encourage more interaction between myself and my community of brave adventurers. For you artistically talented individuals that are listening in, you're really going to enjoy what I have to announce. Without further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPGHorrorstories. Enjoy. This story is titled, are you ready? DMPC from DMC makes D&D game a POC. Okay, so, the worst game I have ever played in. Oh boy. This is when I was just getting started with D&D, so I missed a lot of the red flags. Story contains DMPCs, hypocrisy, cheating, IRL verbal assault, shameless weebism, shameless referencing, shameless character plagiarism, terrible writing, generic villainy, anti-player setting mechanics, unbalanced homebrew out the ass, and editing of PC backstories without permission. Oh my god, is Lucifer your DM? Because that's a long list of cardinal D&D sins. I know most of you saw DMPC and immediately went, oh no. You didn't even need to read the rest of the list. But this was maybe the second game I had ever played in, so I missed a lot of the obvious warning signs. Okay, so, we start with character introduction. Now, I will say in hindsight that I am not innocent in this department. I was edgy. We had a paladin, who was a new player, tiefling sorcerer, veteran wargamer, human rogue, me, and the star of the show, DMPC. The DMPC was described as a human blood hunter, with a red coat and white hair, a sassy attitude, and a dark past. Now, I'm convinced Devil May Cry is the only video game DM has ever played, because it's the only thing he ever talks about, other than anime. So it took me not even half a second to realize he was just playing Dante. I was the Crow, Master Thief and Master of Secrets. I know, I already said I was edgy. Well, the first step to recovery is self-awareness. Trust me, I know everything about self-awareness. I play a narcissistic dragon on the internet. So, session 1. Everybody meets up in a tavern. Standard tavern blah 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 happens, and then Dante from Devil May Cry recruits us for a mission to drive some monsters out of a local mine. As a prank, I replaced the sorcerer's coin pouch with a bag of ball bearings, so that he'd have to ask to borrow money to pay for the inn the next morning. Just since he was a character who sat on his high horse, I thought it would be funny to knock him down a peg. Instead, he took this as an invitation to PvP, because this is apparently a Bethesda game, and touching a fork that doesn't belong to you causes every NPC in the map to become hostile and attack you. DM actually put a stop to this. Maybe the first and last good decision by the DM. I gave him his coin purse back, but the player had animosity towards me as a person for the rest of his time in the game. Session 2. We meet the Miners Guild, who needs us to flush the monsters out of their work site. Keep in mind, this is still a workplace that the miners will need to have to stay intact, so they are still employed. Fun fact about the sorcerer, he is lawful good. Fun fact about the sorcerer player, he thinks the alignment system is stupid and therefore doesn't mean anything. So he suggests that we just blow up the mine with his fire spells and explosives that would have been in the mine. I was new, but even I know that wasn't a lawful good action. So I spoke up. He responds with a 5-minute long rant about how the alignment system is dumb and he should be allowed to act however he wants because his character is dynamic and the alignment system forces people to play static. The whole group is able to talk him down and we go into the mine to kill the monsters as we were hired. End session, begin drama. I'm gonna interject real quick and I'm gonna have a little rant of my own here. I'm actually a big supporter of the alignment system. Why? Because it helps characters to actually be consistent with who their character is. Like, a quick example. The reason why so many people really dislike the narrative of The Last of Us 2 is because the characters aren't consistent with, well, their character. Like, Ellie will just shoot, stab, cut, bludgeon her way through hundreds of innocent people. But when it comes time to actually harm someone who has done her wrong, she sits back and is like, "Am I the real monster?" Yes, you are the real monster. That's been your character up till this point. But sure, go ahead and start thinking about the morality of your actions after you're about to kill someone who has actually wronged you after you've murdered dozens of innocent people already. Maybe if Naughty Dog had taken a page from the D&D alignment system, I wouldn't have wasted $60 on a character-driven game created by people who don't know how to write characters. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you want your character to be dynamic, write them to be like Joel, not like Abby. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Weeaboos. So the game was played online, but we all knew each other from community college as we were all students at the time. So I was hanging out with some friends in the common room of the school playing Smash Ultimate, and I was totally winning, take my word for it, don't ask anyone else. Sorcerer player enters the common room, marches directly up to me, and just unleashes a hissy fit. He is screaming at the top of his lungs about how I'm a bad person, and actively trying to sabotage the group, how I've had it out for him since day one, about how I'm a cheater because I asked the DM if I could do actions in secret, and then just finishing it off with calling me all sorts of profane names and topped it off with a slur. He was removed from campus and banned from the game immediately after the DM heard about it. And that's the story. The problem player has been removed and everyone lived happily ever after. Right? Right? After that, the DM grabs a friend of his as a replacement player. He was the actual life cleric, and said that we would be rebooting the game starting over from the tavern. I didn't mind really. I kind of just wanted to forget about everything that happened. Life Cleric ends up only staying for the first session before personal affairs get in the way, and he leaves the campaign. DM decides not to get a replacement player, and that we could run a campaign with 3 players. Keep in mind, 1 player was the DM. So we get to the mine, and this is where the DMPC issues start. A couple of goblins are guarding the entrance to the mine, but we are able to approach stealthily. I plan to use my rogueness to sneak up on the guard behind him and then drop on them with my daggers. The DMPC says that he can use minor illusion to conjure up the image of a pile of gold that will draw the goblins closer to us instead. Party decides to go with his plan. Now, since he's a PC and the DM, he controls the monsters and affects the illusion/utility spells and the world itself. Meaning that any plan the DMPC comes up with is automatically a success, with no risk of failure or even the need to roll a check. Bro, like, what the f***? Like, why are you even playing D&D at this point? Just write a book. It'd be an awful book, but it'd be better than this. Once we get into the mine, that's when the first big twist is dropped on us. The DMPC drops his spell of disguise self, and reveals that he isn't a human with a red jacket and white hair. He's a half-elf with a jacket and white hair. This is a pattern that shows up all the time in this campaign. The DM will change his subclass, his feats, and even race in between sessions whenever he feels like it, always writing it into the game in some BS way. I asked him why, and he said it's because he doesn't feel the build anymore, or he thinks the character is bad the way he made him. But since he's the DM, he always knows what our next encounter is. And if he does this, he can just change his stat bonuses and class abilities to always be prepared for whatever encounter he designed. The only thing he didn't change was the Haunted One background, because of course. and the fact that he was playing Dante from Devil May Cry. We get deeper into the mine and fight some cultists. We learn that the long-dead super evil villain has returned, so we get paid by the miners and go to the capital to inform the king. There was a short side quest along the way, which was the only time the players got to have any agency in group decision making, so I won't complain about it. We are level 4 by the way, and not famous at all. We have no issue having an audience with the king though, because we're the heroes and blah 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 main character syndrome. He tells us the story, yada yada, super evil guy has returned from the dead, and even though we are level 4, and the king has an entire army at his disposal, he decides to make us the primary task force against the bad guy and his cult. He gives us a house, and we make that our home base. The capital is the hub town of the game, but with a few fun quirks. Quirks such as, if my rogue attempts to commit any crime at all anywhere in the city, a CR20 plus monster will see it and instantly kill me. DM has filled the city with Maruts, which are ultra law sentinel constructs from Sigil, who are extremely powerful. Another fun quirk is how the capital city introduces the Magitech Revolution. The DM is selling the setting on, and you will not believe what it is. By Magitech Revolution, he means the world is your standard generic fantasy world, but with early iterations of cell phones. And no, I don't mean sending stones, I mean the party is given cell phones. And many NPCs can call us whenever. However, this function never actually gets used because we soon discover the real reason he put them in the campaign. The cell phones are just so he can call his anime waifu, who works at the Adventurers Guild. When introduced, her body was described in excruciating detail, including the chest and back of her thighs. And I kid you not, she didn't even have a name until sessions later when I asked her what her name was, and the DM had to pull up a name generator. It's just like what my father used to say. Son, the best kinds of characters are the ones that are defined entirely by their thighs. This is when I started to get physically disgusted by the game. I knew the DM was a weeb, and his most recent anime obsession was Goblin Slayer, which, if you've seen, you know contains some disturbing content. And of course, more hypocrisy, because the DM said to us at the start of the campaign that he wouldn't run NPC romances, because he didn't want to turn the game into a dating sim. Other things of note in the capital were the constant references to other media, either for comedic effect or lack of originality, such as Bob's Tavern, or the local legend Tigtone. Also, at the Bloodhunters Guild Hall, which the city just had, the man who runs it was literally Gehrman from Bloodborne. It was also there that we first discovered that the DM doesn't want to VA a character, he will just ask me to do it instead. I'm no professional, but I like to think I'm pretty alright at voice acting. But I'm a player now, being asked to read from a script written by the DM to voice an NPC that he's talking to. Before we proceed, I would like to talk about the homebrew. DM thought that all players should get a daily use flare ability that was essentially a shonen power-up. Well, I say daily use, but that was just me. I had a daily use ability where I could inflict max sneak attack damage once per day. Turns out, Paladin and Dante got passive abilities instead. Paladin got the ability to auto-average his smite rolls if he chose, and Dante got True Sight up to 60 feet. He also planned how to fix the underpowered abilities Bloodhunters get later on. So he took the two weakest abilities and just replaced them with Barbarian Rage and Paladin Smite. Oh, as a DM myself, that combo is disgusting! Also, Dante eventually settled on one single Blood Hunter subclass that he stuck to for the rest of the game, or at least the rest of the time I spent in the game. He chose Profaned Soul, and got Pact Magic. He also got a patron, which he would choose to be a lich, who was also a doctor, and lived with us, and would give us a 100% full heal whenever we returned home. And the lich was, drumroll, Medic from Team Fortress 2.
Do you like the dream? Hey, I like the dream, baby. Do you like the dream? Oh, I like the dream.
Voiced by me, of course, because the DM can't do a German accent. So, back to the plot. King sends us to find some missing soldiers. It turns out they're being held captive by a cultist's anti-paladin. Whatever the hell that is. The combat encounter was actually designed not terribly. The bad guy was given a fair amount of HP, had 2 attacks per turn, and it was a 1-on-3 fight. But he had a couple of magic items that let him close the distance between himself and me, the ranged attacker. Only real downside was his super generic, finally a challenge, villain dialogue and our paladin's absolutely cursed luck. The fight went on for more than 10 rounds of combat. The paladin only hit 1 attack in the last round. And then I noticed something that I hadn't until this point. It happened after the DMPC got crit and went down. He started rolling death saves. Now, I said this was an online Discord game, so we all used a dice roll bot, with the DM rolling his DM stuff in secret. I only noticed when he started doing death saves that he also did all of his PC rolls in secret. I looked through the Dice Channel history and couldn't find him using it for a single roll, meaning that every time he used a die in this game, whether it was as a DM or as a PC, was subject to potential fudgery. We kill the boss, return to the king, and we are now level 5. The king gives us 5,000 gold pieces as a reward, and we decide to go item shopping. At the blacksmith, I see a magic bow that can shoot through walls and was a +1, but it cost 10,000 gold pieces. So I figured, it would be a good goal to save up for. However, the blacksmith did have a special delivery for Dante, and that was a +2 silver longsword with the finesse property, which he got for free, because it happened to be his father's sword, and backstory, Dante, I hate this.
You, Dante.
I called him out for being overpowered to have gotten it for free. But he said not to worry, as it wasn't overpowered. It was still in its dormant state. And we'd have to go on a quest later to awaken it and unleash its full power. But it's still a +2 longsword with finesse. He also bought a twin firehand crossbow from the guild with his 5,000 gold pieces, which was also a homebrew item. And the final straw that made me leave the campaign. We did a generic fetch quest for Bob Belcher, owner of Bob's Tavern. The week prior, DM messaged me with an unwarranted addition to my backstory. So without me signing off on it, my character now had a rival named Ortek, who died in a dungeon. I said, sure, fine, whatever, he's dead, so who cares? Then, as we return from the fetch quest, I am contacted telepathically by Ortek, who is now a revenant seeking revenge. And that is when I left the campaign. I probably missed a couple or a lot of BS moments, but this was my story to suffer. You're all just here to read my survivor's tale. Well, I'm actually here just to nab your story and then make content for YouTube, but who's keeping track? So that is the worst game I have ever played, and I have not spoken to the DM or the other players since. Would I say I had any positive experience coming out of this? 2 things. First, I think I've become a better writer by being taught what not to do. Second, I felt flattered by being asked to VA all the time, and have actually been practicing and improving ever since. End of story. So I think you've waited long enough. Let's go ahead and unveil the newest segment of Den of the Drake. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Gallery of the Drake. At the end of each of my videos, I will display and review fan art, submitted to me by brave adventurers just like you. Let us begin. This week we will be exploring a piece done by user Novatonix. I have titled this masterpiece, Drake After Dark. Here we see myself perched upon a pile of gold pieces and a rightfully earned, and not at all stolen, YouTube play button. Truly a marvelous interpretation by a very talented artist. It is currently valued at over $4 billion and will make an excellent addition to my hoard. Oh, that accent was awful. So, essentially, Gallery of the Drake will be a new end segment where viewers can submit their fan art to the email in my About section to get their artwork featured on the channel. I love fan art, and I'll be sure to appreciate every single piece that gets sent to the channel, as long as I can show it on YouTube and stay monetized. I mean, I've seen some of you furries skulking around my comment section. I'm looking at you. In all seriousness, though, I'm excited to see what you all bring to the table, and I'm even more excited to use Gallery of the Drake to involve more of my community in my videos. And with that, we're gonna wrap up. I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.